Look, the problem with takeout is always the same. It's too expensive, obviously, and by the time it gets to you, it doesn't taste as good as it would in the restaurant. If you want to know how to make something affordable, fast, and super craveable, these Dan Dan Mian are it. With one trip to an Asian grocery store and a little bit of know-how, you can have these Dan Dan noodles on deck, ready to go at any time in 20 minutes. Keep this recipe bookmarked for those days that you just can't do takeout, but you're craving something spicy, saucy, and creamy. Starting with what you really need to keep around to make these noodles happen. Some things to consider right off the bat. Most of these ingredients I'm going to recommend buying will last a really long time, so you'll be able to get a ton of servings out of them. They're also super versatile and should flesh out your pantry a little bit. For me, I use a lot of these ingredients day to day. Stuff like my spicy miso ramen, any stir fries I do. It's good to just have these ingredients on hand for. One of the most important flavors of this dish is spice, and a majority of that will come from chili oil. This brings some nice spicy flavor, a little texture, and some saucy mouthfeel. You could get a classic like lao gao ma, or branch out into something that looks good and looks a little fun. Be sure to not get something crazy hot though, because the sauce is going to contain a good amount of this. The other main spicy ingredient are these Sichuan peppercorns. Ma la is the nummy, spicy flavor you get with good Sichuan food. It's more of a sensation than it is a flavor. It's there to make your mouth tingle a little bit. You could go full peppercorns like this, or you could get some powder already prepared. This is black vinegar, probably my favorite tasting vinegar. It's smoky and really umami forward, so it's easier to utilize in dips and everyday cooking. This also makes really delicious dumpling sauce if you're somebody that keeps frozen dumplings around. Shaoxing wine is going to be our cooking wine. Think of this as fragrance and depth. Compare it to how Italian food utilizes Marsala wine. It's not for drinking necessarily, it's there for flavor. Everybody knows soy sauce. There's a ton of different options, but go with a light soy sauce rather than a sweet or dark one. Light soy is that sort of salty soy sauce most people think of. Now for the ingredient that makes this dish creamy and super fragrant: sesame paste and sesame oil. There are two ways to get this. You could seek out the Chinese toasted sesame paste and use that. This is traditional, but I don't usually get this stuff. I often already have tahini on hand, which I use for hummus. Tahini isn't exactly the same thing, so I supplement it with this, toasted sesame oil. The flavor helps bring that rich toastiness you'd expect from the Chinese toasted sesame paste. It's a good way to make an ingredient like tahini take on double duty. This really wouldn't be Dan Dan Mian without yacai, or seasoned preserved mustard greens. Look for this, which is suimi yacai. This is sort of a spicy, tangy, salty pickle from Sichuan that lends some really delicious texture and flavor to the dish. Our last pickup is the noodle itself. If you have the option, these fresh Chengdu noodles are exactly what you want. However, if you can't find these, dried wheat noodles or even dried ramen noodles can work as well. I think if you really can't find any of these, you could probably get away with a nice spaghetti, but don't tell anybody I told you that. All of these pantry staples cost me around 30 bucks and will make a ton of Dan Dan Mian and other dishes. For reference, getting 2 orders of Dan Dan noodles from a local takeout spot would cost me like $32 before tip, so totally worth it in my opinion. With our pantry ingredients gathered, let's do the only bit of cooking really required for these noodles: the pork topping. I like mine with deeply browned, crispy pork, almost like flavor bomb pork sprinkles. For each noodle bowl, I'll use about 115 grams of ground pork, or like 1/4 of a pound. This is enough for a nice topping without the whole dish being like super over meaty. This isn't a meat sauce, it's more of a meat topping. In a hot pan, begin melting a little bit of lard. In my case, this pork was super fatty, so I actually had to take out some of the fat. I probably didn't need to add lard to the pan here. This could be vegetable oil if you don't have lard around. Once hot, add the ground pork and season with a hefty pinch of salt. Break this down with a spatula and cook until just starting to brown. At this point right here, grate in 1 clove of garlic so that can cook into the pork while it starts to brown. Keep moving this around and continue breaking the pork chunks down into small pieces about this size. The browning has occurred and it looks really, really nice and delicious, so we can turn off the heat and add in about 1 tablespoon of shaoxing wine. The pan should have enough heat to cook off the alcohol, but the sweet fragrance of the wine should stick around. These are, without a doubt, one of the best parts of the dish, so don't skip on them. That's it. Let these rest and hang out while we talk sauce, noodles, and toppings. The sauce for Dan Dan Mian is easily the most important flavor component of the dish. It's what makes this whole thing super craveable, spicy, and creamy. I'll start with a base of chili oil, 2 to 3 tablespoons depending on your spice tolerance. Next, add in 2 tablespoons of black vinegar, 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce, a large heaping tablespoon of tahini, a tablespoon of toasted sesame oil, and then to balance some of the heat that's in it, add about a half teaspoon of sugar. This benefits from a few pinches of MSG if you've got it around. I'm going to be adding a bunch of scallion tops to the final bowl, so I'll add the whites into the sauce. The flavor of the nice, sharp, oniony punch is really good in a bowl of noodles like this. This is like 2 to 3 green onions with the whites separated from the more tender green section. Finely chop the whites and then thinly slice the green section. We can add the chopped whites into the sauce. This can now be mixed until fully combined. Give this a taste and bask in the glorious complexity of the sauce. It's so tasty and it's going to perfectly coat our noodles. This sauce is going to be split between our 2 bowls. For our noodles, let's get a pot of water on the stove to boil. We're just gonna use this for the noodles because I've got a different technique for our vegetable component. I've been really into steaming veggies in the microwave lately, so I like to do that with my baby bok choy. It's really fast and surprisingly efficient. Chop a large head of baby bok choy into fourths and wash in between the leaves so there isn't any dirt or grime. Place that in a microwave safe bowl, season it with salt, and then cover it with cling film. Poke a few holes in the film and nuke this in 30-second bursts for a total of like 1 to 2 to 3 minutes. Depending on how thick they are, you're gonna wanna test for doneness at like the 1.5 minute mark. And once it's tender for your preference, go ahead and just set it aside. Now is a good time to drop your noodles in the boiling water, enough for 2 servings. For me, that's 1 bunch per person. Cook these to the time suggested on the package. For these fresh noodles, it's like a little bit less than 5 minutes. Be sure to mix these up with tongs while they cook so they don't stick together. Also, be sure to grab a bit of this hot water now. Like 1 to 2 tablespoons is gonna help thin the sauce out so it coats your noodles correctly. That's just gonna be a judgment call when you're actually sitting down to eat. Once your timer goes off, you're sort of on a clock here, so you're gonna wanna move fast. Split your prepared sauce between 2 bowls, so each one is getting half of the sauce. Immediately top that sauce with the noodles, and then add on half of those pork sprinkles. Top it with some of the yacai as well, maybe like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, depending on how much you like it. Be sure to taste these. They're pretty salty and really, really delicious, but you don't wanna go adding like 2 tablespoons of this and then just over salting your dish. The baby bok choy can go on along with this sliced scallion greens. Add on some Sichuan pepper powder, which can easily be made by toasting 1 teaspoon of peppercorns in a hot dry pan for about a minute or so. Grind them in a spice grinder and then sift out the large husks. Go easy on this at first, so just do like a little sprinkle, as some people have an aversion to the numminess if they're not used to it. I love it, but my wife doesn't, so I'm always mindful to add less to her bowl than I am to mine. Lastly, sprinkle on some crushed roasted peanuts, or in my case, Trader Joe's has these really good chili cashews that I like to chop up and add on top as well. This is how you make one of the best noodle dishes of all time. The fun thing is you gotta give this whole thing a good mix for the dish to really take shape. The final step of cooking is done at the table in the bowl of the person consuming it. I think that's really cool and kind of fun to do. For how delicious these noodles are, you'd expect there to be way more work involved. This is one of those dishes where the deliciousness to work ratio is just off the charts. Most of that really is due to the sauce that we made. To me, these are one of my most craved dishes of all time. It hits that salty note, it hits the sweetness, it hits the spicy, tangy. It is everything you could possibly want in a noodle bowl. Now, this is sort of the more dry style of this dish. There's also a soupy version, and there's a Japanese style ramen version of this. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to see me tackle those. Thank you so much to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. They get some cool benefits for supporting the channel, so check it out and consider becoming a patron. Now, if you're not in the mood for noodles, you may want to check out this chicken parm recipe I put out last week. It's so perfect, and it's crispy and bubbly cheese. Oh yeah, it's so good. I think you're gonna like that one. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.